So this particular team, Coddington Financial Services, and this is actually a real case study here. Team coming together. You've got Chris as the advisor and the leader. John is the chief operating officer. You know, scenarios they're hiring, you know, for the long term in the team. Behavior based on what type of people and what they need for that team. So they need a client relationship manager, an analyst, financial planner, a trainer, and family facilitator. What styles would you expect them to have? And their names. Just let's do a quick little exercise here. What do you think they need for the client relationship manager? What type of profile type?
Engager.
Good. Do you think a community builder could fill that role? How about the analyst? Engager? Who do you think would fit that role?
What are my list of options?
Strategist maybe?
Strategist probably would be good. Reflective thinker? Think you'd want an influencer in that role?
Yep.
Somebody on the result side and somebody on the relationship side. How about the financial planner? This is somebody that actually does sort of the nuts and bolts of creating the plan.
Strategist?
Could be a strategist.
I was gonna say someone, well, maybe an initiator.
Influencer?
Well, this is somebody that's going to be putting the plan together through using potential technology to be able to help do that. They actually may have some client interaction too. They could actually be meeting with client. You guys do in your firm. So,
They have to get the information from
yeah,
the client.
they have to get the information to build the plan. So,
Community builder.
could be a community builder. Absolutely. Maybe a little bit more of a planned community builder.
What about a stylish thinker that is a little bit open?
I think that's a great idea. I think stylish thinkers are very good for that. Probably the most unique role for that, because they can be outgoing with the client, can be planned and organized. How about for the trainer, and this is a family facilitator that's actually helping families with team, you know, with high net worth families. What do you think you would need there?
Engager?
So engager,
Community builder.
community builder. Could be.
Relationship builder.
Relationship builder might feel a little bit, because it's you're dealing with the family. Could be on the one-on-one. And if you have sort of a real, even in family businesses or in high net worth families, there could be some conflict going on. And so you have to remember this person has to be pretty strong in their ability to help the family get through some creative conflict as well.
There's one word in the description there that gives it away. The facilitator. Facilitators are very good, generally speaking, at dealing with groups of people. There's enough take charge in the profile, and there's enough relationship building in the profile to do that. They might be reserved, that could be the only challenge, but at teaching people, counselling, training, mediation, any of those types of roles, they're pretty good at it.
So we're going to run this, you know Chris Coddington pretty well now. Very, that very hard charging profile. He's growing his team. So here's Chris and his team that they've hired. So you can see here, got a blend, quite a big blend. You got the strategist, community builder, influencer, relationship builder, engager, stylish thinker. Interesting. Looks like our team today, a little bit, doesn't it? As far as the makeup. 5 relational, 4 results. They roll up as an adapter team, though. And when you looked at that, you could kind of see that there's, some results cited, with this reflective thinker, the strategist, the stylish thinker, 2 strategists on the team. So it would make sense it'd be a little bit more of the result side. But they roll up as an adapter team. I think that's a great start. Then we would want to make sure that at least review the compatibility matrix, which would show, where there's a little bit more modification needed for each team member. The workplace attitudes, very similar to ours. I think ours was fast-paced. So this particular factor is pioneering and cooperative. So you definitely have sort of an interesting pioneering and cooperative sort of, does that seem a little, probably really interesting dynamics going on in the team. The blind spots, this one's too focused on the cooperative, too hesitant. And depending on sort of the weighting of that, it could probably, you want to sort of key in on that. But, they do like to have challenges. They're goal-driven. They want to focus on the practical. Anything in there that stands out for anybody? Got Chris over here on the take charge. You got a lot of cooperative folks there. People's pretty balanced. Chris is the leader, as you mentioned earlier, that is earmarked by that green, so you can spot the leader. It's always good to have that. You got Chris and Bobby, pretty fast-paced. Carol over here is the only one on the patient side. Structure, fairly structured. Trust. Chris is probably going to be the one asking a lot of questions to need to know. And I wouldn't even say that 56 is super high for trusting. Most people are in the middle. Pioneering, you have really no content individuals, Doug being the lowest on the number. Oops. Anything stand out? Risk, fairly balanced, and creativity, fairly balanced. Anything stand out? I mean, I think this looks like a pretty balanced team. But they may have some issues, because Chris does have that very skeptical side, so for him to learn, but I would even imagine, even with that, there's probably a lot of people that can flex that ability to make sure that things that's building that trustful environment. Because if they were in the 60s on the trusting, it probably would be a little bit more believing and sort of giving the trust rate up front. I'd say this is pretty balanced.
You mentioned very balanced, and we saw that there was a lot of people from the different quadrants on the wheel, which rolled up to an adapter. Would that be a goal that you'd want to pursue or not?
Quite honestly, when I do it, I always get excited about it because it does show that they will have the ability, if they really understand and trust each other, to have better performance. But if they roll up as an initiator team, you probably have some customer care sort of, because everybody's driven to get to the next innovation. If you have an engager team, there's going to be a lot of engaging going on, but maybe not a lot of production on projects.
Adapters seems like the optimum blend goal to me. Am I missing something there?
Yep. You got it.
On a general basis, having a team as a starting point, your statement is true. I think having the adapter means that you've got a blend of all the talents that you would need in the team. Then the reason you would vary outside that is to say, okay, if you've got an outside sales team that's going to have more influencers and initiators in there, then you might want a mix of different traits. Or you've got a very strong internal customer service team or inside sales team, it could vary again. There's a general, but even then you should still have some different talents in there to balance it out. But otherwise, but generally speaking, having the balance there is better, and having the adapter is better. The one issue in this one that I wanted to bring out when Leon was asking, was there anything else you see in here, is it's fallen out as an adapter, but actually Chris has got a very strong set of scores that's counteracting almost the rest of the team in that. So if there's going to be any problem in this team, it's going to be Chris.
Is it unusual for a pioneer to have a content as opposed to more of a creative score? That was what stood out for me, is that the leader is skeptical, is pioneering, but yet his content factor is really, really on this side versus the creative side, which I would think that would be...
The anchored side, you mean?
The
Anchored.
side, I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
yes.
So,
Whereas,
yeah.
anchored versus creative.
Right, so these three scores here are not correlated in any way. If they correlate it to anything, it would be to the command factor.
Okay.
So it would not be unusual for someone to be strong in this one, high, and then there. And there again, somebody could be strong, say, on these two, and they're not as driven and goal driven as in there. So they're quite independently. They don't flow together, these three. But they're telling a story that Chris is very goal driven. He's going to take all sorts of risks, but he's going to do it with things he knows about, that he's experienced before. He is not your daydreamer who's going to come out with some new idea that no one else in the world has thought about. He is probably not going to be the inventor of Facebook. Right? So Zuckerberg, it would be a good chance he is all three of those. Right?
Steve Jobs probably was all three of those.
Yeah, yeah. Even Bill Gates. Right? But that doesn't mean he can't be an entrepreneur. The entrepreneurs, we normally say, would have two of these three would need to be strong, right? So that's something you're going to learn, is that we will work on, is when two of those three are strong, then the entrepreneurial streak would be there. One of the greatest entrepreneurs that I know is not Chris Coddington, but is a guy that is like this. And he has taken like existing franchise concepts and operationalized those into quite big businesses, very quickly. So he's taken the existing plan, designs, and gone and absolutely, like a bulldog, made that happen, and taken a risk. If that helps, yeah.
It does. Thank you.
The only associations you draw with the profiles are actually in the first 5. Where someone who's cooperative would usually be patient, and someone who's outgoing would be spontaneous, right? Except for the odd one, the facilitator, and then the stylish thinker. That's
Someone who's cooperative would be patient, and what was the other?
outgoing would be spontaneous. So the outgoing people are very free-flowing. So therefore, anything to do with details, organisation is getting in the way of that happening. You would rarely see someone who's 70 on outgoing and then 70 or 60 on planned, right? Except my mother.
Then you'd be dealing with the stylist.
Yep. Yep.
Paul has pretty high scores.
Yeah, but you don't see it a lot, right? And it's a very rare profile because it's sort of going against the grain. Now, if you can, if you understand it, you can work with it, right? You can do something with it. I mean, it's like all of the combinations. They're all good. It's just a matter of understanding it. Well,
So what is the story of the cooperative and the fast pace? If it's cooperative and patient you would see together, then what's the story of cooperative and fast pace?
good question. You don't see many of them.
You don't see it often.
That's me.
Yeah, you don't see that.
So I want to know what that means.
You'll see it a little bit with engager, but you would see that with engagers. Some of them will be a little bit more of a follower, but they can be quite, what I call rational. But you don't see that, at great strengths. You don't see that all the time either.
Can you go back one slide? So if you talked about the entrepreneur's story being pioneered, risk taker, and creative. Yeah. All right, so pioneered, cautious, and anchored. What story is that?
That's not to say you couldn't be an entrepreneur, but it's going to be something that you already know about, you've processed, and you've really built out the design map for. If the pioneer is strong and the fast-paced is strong enough, which is resilience, then you could well be, right? But it's probably going to be not in multiple things. It's going to be in something that you've studied, you've had a lot of experience with, you've built all the plans, and you build a roadmap for. Does that make sense? Whereas the person who's high in those three, it could be multiple businesses, a lot of different things going on. And in fact, their struggle, because we've got a number of them who are our strategic partners. In fact, I like to keep them as our strategic partners at times because they're coming up with an idea a minute, right? And it's actually very hard to handle. And their gift in life is they can do that. Their challenge is staying steady with something, right? Whereas for your profile, Keith, it's about once you've got it and you build out the plan and the manual, then here it is, and you can really make it stick, and other people can follow it. But you might be a little slower at getting that together, but once it's there, it'll be very real and tangible. Whereas these guys actually need someone like you to partner up with them to help make it real. But the number one trait that we've measured for entrepreneurship, so we've just done the research study on this, is resilience, which comes from the fast-paced trait. That's the first one. The second one is risk-taking. The third one is creative. The fourth one is pioneer. So the first one for entrepreneurship is being fast-paced, which is about resilience. There. The second one is risk. The third one is creative, and the fourth one's pioneer.
Where do you get the resilience from, the fast-paced, out of the rational, task-focused, and confronting?
So they're the people that can handle objections better, a bit more calculated, or okay, I made a loss, dust themselves off, accept it, and keep moving. So they'll be a bit tougher at dealing with the bumps in the journey and just writing it off and, okay, that one was a mistake, I'll get into the next one now. As opposed to the patient people will be more hurt, emotionally, particularly by things not working out that way. Then they could get embarrassed, not want to confront the situation, deal with the conflicts that happen. And when we're talking about entrepreneurship here, we're talking about building a scalable business, getting it funded. There's usually a lot of risk-taking going on, heavy bumps in the road, as opposed to, it's again, how do you frame entrepreneurship? Because there's different levels of that, right? And we will never say someone can't be an entrepreneur. It will come back to, do you have the purpose, the passion, some drive, some cause that you want to go out and fight for and believe in. I believe that's where it starts, but it sure helps in taking the knocks on the journey, and the fact you've got to deal with business plan A becomes business plan G. It's got to become business. It will happen. That is easier for a fast-paced person to deal with. But I'm not going to say someone who's not that can't do it, but I would be making them aware this is what's going to happen.
And I think one of the things that Josh and I want to focus on too is anyone can be an entrepreneur, but you need to have, the passion, the drive, and things like that. But one of the things you also really need to have are the hiring skills. The next person you hire has to fill in your gaps. So one of the things we're looking at, like, I'm an engager. I'm high on cooperative, trusting, outgoing. I'm 50-50 on a risk taker. I could do it, but I have to hire somebody that's a little bit bigger on risk, maybe a little bit faster paced than I am, more take charge than I am, maybe a little bit more planned than I am. So you have to know how to fill in those gaps. Otherwise, you're going to hire somebody just like you because you get along and you get nothing done.
Very good. Excellent.
Not to derail this, because I know you've got things to do, but it's
It all helps the learning. The questions all help the learning, so ask them.
Go back to Monique had mentioned earlier. She asked a question about rogue, and you
About which?
rogue, the rogue.
Oh, yeah, the rogue, yep.
Yeah, and you named the three. So immediately I thought of Bernie Madoff.
Yeah.
Okay, and you mentioned that those were competitive, creative, and reserved. He was not reserved. Competitive, creative, you could see, but I don't see him as a reserved person. He was out there. I mean, he was in the public eye. He was involved with exchanges, and
Yep.
so how does that deviate from what you said then, or how does that still fit with what you said then, as far as those three characteristics?
Well, I would look at he certainly had two of the three that would have been very strong, and then the side that is he probably had a love of money too much, which comes from being outgoing, and that's that was part of the drive. But normally the rogues we would expect, and there's quite a lot of other research out there that corroborate that, are more secretive type people. They get it done in a secretive type way.
I guess his secretive way was he
might be the contradiction.
Well, his secretive way was he had that other floor that his sons weren't allowed to access to, and it was just him.
Everything was secretive about it. All the other people he had were low key people.
Yeah.
As well, they weren't out there driving around in yachts and hoofing it up. It was just him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
But it was feeding his drug.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking that it could be what you perceive as outgoing, could be actually coming from an initiator, that he had to be an initiator, and even authoritative, where he had to have a public persona
to be able to draw
to draw clients, but he wasn't using it from an outgoing. He could have been taking it from other aspects.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah. Good.
Because the secrecy came to mind when you said that. I thought he actually was very secretive.
Yeah,
about
that second floor where nobody was able to go on there, including his sons, were excluded from that. That was that secret floor that allowed that to actually happen. His other business was very public, very open.
And I think the other part is, if you look at it, so we're unraveling him a little bit, but is he could compartmentalize it, right? He's committing these crimes for years, and he's compartmentalized it. So that also goes with someone perhaps who's more reserved, is able to lock that up and away, whereas someone extremely extrovert, is very emotional person would have trouble hiding that, and would have more trouble keeping the straight face when you've got a regulator in there, that type of thing. So, maybe if he was profiled, as much as what we've seen, above the iceberg, the tip of the iceberg is the outgoing, but underneath might have been more reserved.
And just the things that have happened since the trial and all that, I think he was more reserved because he's pretty resilient.
He's quite happy being in solitary confinement.
Yeah. I don't think you didn't see a lot of that emotional sort of reaction to any of that. The family did.
But it's a good question because I think the thing is why I know this wasn't the topic of discussion, but by asking the questions we're reinforcing the behavioural knowledge, and analysing, and that's really what at the end of the day this is all about. So ask the questions because I think it helps tie it in all better.